The Italian synodal journey is about to take a step that leaves many speechless, a document that, upon reading, no longer seems Catholic, not to mention heretical. But beware, because what's happening in Italy could soon affect the entire church worldwide. Stay tuned. We'll tell you what's really happening and why this text could change the face of Catholicism forever. On October 16th, the document entitled Leaven of Peace and Hope, a concluding summary of the synodal journey that has been underway for several years in Italian dioceses, was published on the official website of the Italian Episcopal Conference. This is a text that, while presenting itself as a simple collection of local reflections, has already become a national case, attracting the attention not only of the faithful, but also of the secular media. The document will be put to a vote during the Third Synodal Assembly of the Churches in Italy, scheduled for October 25th, a date that marks a decisive moment in defining the pastoral direction of the country's church. Behind the sober official communication, however, one can glimpse the extent of the change that this text could introduce. Yeast of Peace and Hope is not just any document. It brings together voices, experiences, and proposals that aim to reflect the real life of Christian communities, but which in their concreteness challenge doctrinal balances that have until now been considered fixed. Attention is focused in particular on certain formulations that, in the eyes of many observers, seem to reflect sensitivities typical of contemporary civil and political language rather than ecclesial tradition. It is precisely this intertwining of theology and sociology, of evangelical proclamation and secular culture that makes the debate so heated. The result is a text that, even before it was voted on, has already divided Catholic opinion. For some, it represents a necessary step toward a more welcoming and dialoguing church. For others, a dangerous sign of surrender to the world's mentality. But one thing is certain: the debate is open, and the October 25th Assembly promises to be a turning point capable of influencing the direction of Italian Catholicism for years to come. Among the most controversial passages is the one that asks dioceses to promote recognition and support for individuals and families who, due to their circumstances, do not always find full acceptance in ecclesial communities. Overcoming the discriminatory attitudes sometimes present within the church and society. At first glance, the phrase sounds like a call to charity, a central value of the Christian faith. However, upon closer examination, expressions emerge that seem more like the language of social campaigns than of theology. The term recognition, used in the document, carries a specific cultural weight. It's not simply a matter of welcoming or accompanying, but of publicly affirming a certain type of identity and bond, which from a Christian perspective requires discernment and moral clarity. It is on this point that the perplexity of many observers focuses. There is a fear that the Church, by adopting words born in contexts foreign to its doctrine, will end up absorbing its categories as well, to the point of confusing mercy with legitimacy. Some priests have privately expressed fears that behind the language of welcome lies a form of cultural surrender, a sort of adaptation to the world so as not to appear judgmental. It's not a question of who to welcome or not, explained one parish priest we spoke to, but of not changing the meaning of words. If the Church gives up speaking the truth in the name of inclusion, it stops being a light and becomes a mirror. Others, however, argue that pastoral care cannot limit itself to repeating formulas, but must be able to read the wounds of the present time and offer hope to those who feel marginalized. The fact remains that this linguistic ambiguity has opened a clear divide. On one side, those who fear a cultural drift; on the other, those who see these choices as a step of mercy. But the issue isn't just one of words. It's one of vision. It's about understanding whether the Church wants to continue to be a teacher of truth, or whether it prefers to become, as many bitterly say, just one voice among many in the world's chorus. Another point, destined to spark debate, is the proposal that the Episcopal Conference support, through prayer and reflection, the days promoted by civil society against all forms of violence and discrimination. They cited in particular those dedicated to gender violence, pedophilia, bullying, femicide, and various forms of intolerance. On the surface, this is a welcome invitation, a gesture of solidarity with the victims of abuse and injustice. However, many note how this list also includes anniversaries that, while inspired by good intentions, often end up becoming ideological platforms far from the Christian vision of man. Many have been wondering what the line is between evangelical witness and supporting campaigns that, in practice, convey messages that conflict with Catholic anthropology. Prayers for victims are always legitimate, but publicly supporting days born in cultural contexts where faith is marginalized risks creating confusion. On the other hand, those who defend the text insist on the value of dialogue and witness. Praying for the victims, they say, does not mean adhering to an ideology, but rather showing the compassionate face of the Church in a wounded world. Yet the line remains thin. Symbolic participation in certain initiatives, even just through reflection, can easily be interpreted as moral endorsement. It is precisely this ambiguity that makes the document so divisive. On the one hand, the desire to be a sign of mercy; on the other, the need not to lose its doctrinal identity. Thus, while society invites us to walk together, many Catholics wonder whether this path still leads to the cross, or rather, to a worldly consensus that saves no one. Among the most discussed proposals of the synodal document is the one that invites dioceses to develop new programs for the formation of relationships and education in physicality, affectivity, and sexuality, aimed at pre-adolescents, adolescents, young people, and their educators. Taking into account, it says, each individual's personal orientation and identity. This formulation, to some, sounds like a simple updating of educational curricula in light of modern challenges. For others, however, it opens a deep breach, introducing into ecclesial language concepts that belong to the lexicon of contemporary relativism. But the crucial question remains: can the Church educate according to mutable categories, adapting to the language of the world, without distorting its own mission? The answer hasn't arrived yet, but the document, with its nuances, marks a point of no return in the way we understand Christian education. It's the sign of a period that, rather than educating in the truth, seems to want to teach us to live with ambiguity. What do you think? If you liked the video, comment Amen. God bless you.